My father was a stereotypical deadbeat drug addict. He injected, snorted, smoked anything he could get his hands on. He was prone to be extremely violent. There's a million stories I could tell, but I'm going to focus on one in particular for this story. Despite what my mom was going through, she stayed with my father because of me. She desperately wanted to have a loving home life where I could experience the joy of having both my parents. I didn't really realize how bad things were until I got older and really thought back on the past. My father would buy drugs before he fed me, take me to crack houses in terrible neighborhoods, bring me to houses of his friends, and left me to entertain myself while he cheated on my mother. I woke up almost every morning to him being covered in his own urine and vomit. I could never understand why my mother was so upset and what she was putting herself through working 10-hour days just to come home to her own hell. My mom's breaking point was when I had found a strange white powder on my bookshelf and was playing with it one day when I was home alone. We tried to leave for the first time that night. My mom and I gathered the small things we could fit in her bags, stuffed it in the back of her truck, and drove to her sister's house. It took about 2 days for my father to find us, and the fallout was exponentially worse than we ever could imagine. No child wants to give up on a parent, no matter how abusive they are. My father was crying on the doorstep to my aunt's house, pleading his case on how he would give up drugs if we just came home with him. I believed him and my mom, and I returned home. Everything was exactly how it was left, except for 2 of our dining room chairs being placed in the middle of the kitchen. As I entered our apartment, I heard him smash my mom's head against the entry wall to the left. She wasn't knocked out, but the sound it made was vile, like a bag of meat being thrown on the floor. As she collapsed from the pain, I remember turning around confused. I felt a weird sense of anger I haven't felt since. Everything inside felt like it was on fire. I ran at my dad. The next part was like a movie. He threw a punch so fast I couldn't see it coming. I woke up tied to the chair, not being able to hear properly, and not knowing where I was. My nose was plugged with something. I looked around the room and my father was by the stove, boiling water. One hand was tied outstretched. I couldn't focus on anything and the light was piercing. The most intense pain I have ever felt to this day was having that water poured over my hand. I had never seen my mom cry before this. If it wasn't for neighbors calling the police, I think my mom and I would have died there. I was brought to the hospital and treated for second-degree burns covering 75% of my hand. Once the blister healed, there were 2 huge ones and 1 small one. The skin once they popped was weirdly smooth. A fractured orbital bone and a broken nose. My mom filed for divorce the next day, and my dad was charged with aggravated assault and was given orders not to contact anyone in our family until the trial had concluded. I thought everything was going to be okay. I did wish that things had played out differently, that I had a normal dad, but at least my mom and I were safe now. My mom and I found a new apartment and I spent most of my time in my room. After a month, my mom forced me to go out and ride my bike. After about 2 blocks, I saw it. That old Ford with the New York Rangers sticker on the bumper. My father loved the Rangers. I biked full speed into a large park directly in front of me. The exits were too small for a truck to fit in. I watched as my father circled the park in his car. If I crossed it, he would be waiting for me there. I glided to my left and tried to double back to the path that ran beside the one I entered, from using the houses surrounding the park as cover. I didn't scream for help. I had no thoughts besides run. He pulled up at the end of the exit and said something like, "I'm your father. I just want you to come home with me." Everything he said was slurred and almost incoherent. He got out, hugged me, and I hugged him back. As I was walking away to leave, his hand covered my mouth and his other grabbed me by my waist. He popped the trunk and stuffed me in it. The darkness engulfed me. The only sounds were those of a radio set to a police station. I could hear them faintly over casual sounds of the road and the car's moving parts. I had seen in a TV show that some cars have a trunk release from the inside. I couldn't find it if there was one in the pitch black. I tried clawing around for anything to use to get out. My hand just ran over some empty bags and papers with some plastic tubing, nothing I could try to defend myself with. I thought about what was going to happen to me. I wondered if he would kill me once the car stopped. I wondered if he was just driving away with me and was going to start a new life with me so my mom could never see me again. I thought about how my mom would react. I knew she would blame herself. I lost track of time, even though I'd later find out it hadn't been that long at all. After 20 minutes, my father lost control of the car and crashed into an oncoming car on a semi-busy road. I was thrown around in the trunk. I broke 2 ribs from the impact, refractured my still unhealed orbital bone, as well as dislocated my shoulder. My father was dead on impact. The trunk had popped open in the crash. Feeling the fresh air mixed with the metallic taste of blood hit my mouth was the last thing I can still vividly remember. The ambulance was the first to arrive at the scene. They were afraid to move me, as I could have been paralyzed easily from a crash like that. Apparently, I was just murmuring incoherent gibberish. They pricked my feet with a pen, and when they moved, they loaded me onto an ambulance while police arrived at the scene. Once at the hospital, I had my clothes cut and replaced by a blanket. They placed me in another dark room, the only determinable feature being a TV tuned to Dora the Explorer. The nurse was trying to explain to me that I was being put to sleep so the doctors could help me. I screamed. I wasn't going to sleep no matter what they did to me. I slowly drifted off, fighting the restraints less and less. I woke up being wheeled back and started screaming and crying as loud as I could. My mom and the rest of the family were there. I was confused, but they talked me down. I spent the rest of the week watching every episode of Pokemon I think they've ever made. I'm still not okay with what happened 100%, but I felt like maybe getting it out there might make me feel a little better. I got into drugs and alcohol for a bit to help with the pain, but I kicked it because I didn't want to end up like him. I just often think, what would life have been like if I had been born into a normal family with a normal father?